So let's talk about the dominant first. What does a dominant ISTP look like?
So the dominant ISTP has a tendency to be more managerial and leadership focused. Well, they may not always be in leadership or management, but they always have a sense of confidence. They have fast reactions time. They trust themselves and their experiences, and they're people who make the most of any situation. They're smart. They're tactical. They have learned how to be in charge, basically, and so they're more dominant, right? They have more of an energy of assertiveness, and as opposed to seeking power, I have a feeling that people sort of start to follow them. They look behind themselves and discover that people are behind them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So unlike other dominant subtypes that are actively looking for managerial or positions of power or leadership positions, I have a feeling that these ISTPs just find themselves there.
Yeah. Okay. So what jobs would they maybe cluster toward, or careers would this style of ISTP look toward?
Well, because they're really good with problem solving, because they have that confidence and that capacity to build leadership skills, they also have good verbal and visual spatial skills, language-based reasoning, and they're usually pretty well socialized. So meaning that if you have the stereotype of an ISTP that is antisocial, it would not be the dominant ISTP. But despite that, they're still going to be quiet and contemplative. They're just going to have better social skills than others. And because of that, they end up being good in positions of administration, business, science, technology. And oftentimes, like I said, they just kind of find themselves in positions of leadership, management, and training, right? Oftentimes they'll find themselves in a position where they're training other people to do things. And they are commonly found in the military. The trick is, though, unlike other dominant subtypes, like some dominant subtypes need to make their own thing, so they're more entrepreneurial and create their own business and want scale. Others do best when they're in a structure that really creates a good platform for them. This ISTP can thrive anywhere as long as there's some flexibility to it. So as long as they can really find a place with room to make their own decisions.
Yeah.
That's the key. So they'll take on pretty much almost any position that requires that in charge demeanor, that ability to make those fast decisions and problem solve, and they'll play nice with others as long as there's some room for them to determine how they want to go about that.
I'm thinking right now of two ISTPs that are both co-founders / CEOs of companies. One is a Fortune 500 company, a really big company. The other is a smaller, I wouldn't say it's a small business, but it's a much smaller company than Fortune 500. Both of them are good with people, like connecting with people in a social way. Mm-hmm. But both of these ISTPs have a hard time with intimacy and like one-on-one connection. I notice they can lead people, but that interpersonal like connection part feels like a real challenge for them.
Yeah, well, I think they're going to still be introverts, of course. But the other thing is, or component to this dominant subtype, is that they're kind of hard to persuade or sway in any way.
Yeah.
They have a lot of confidence in their firsthand experience, in their knowledge and information. They have a high degree of certainty. And so because of that, they tend to, they're hard for other people to persuade. And that probably means that they're also hard to interface with in some way, like in a personal way.
Yeah.
That said, they usually are very good at getting things done. They're really good at putting their knowledge into sort of practical results, right? They're really good at creating tangible results. And they are particularly good at being persistent, right? They're really, really persistent. And so eventually, like you said, they can be at the top of Fortune 500 companies, their own company that they started, because they just have that groundedness and that persistence and that unswayability.
I think the word that comes up for me for the dominant ISTP is resourceful. Mm-hmm. They don't have to have all the resources to start the project. They don't have to have it all like dialed in first. They can start moving toward the thing they want, attuning to that, and be resourceful along the way to get there.
Yeah. One note that Dario mentions is that hobbies and activities are very important. So if you are a dominant ISTP, your career is not going to be enough.
Yeah.
Right. So even if you're a person who's like spending 80 hours a week on your career, maybe you do have a company you started, or you're, you're an entrepreneur, or just somebody who's a manager managing I don't know, like a series of restaurant chains, who knows? You're still going to need a hobby. And he said, ideally athletics, a craft, or immersing in nature. So you're not going to feel right and balanced unless you have an outside hobby outside of your career.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the technical stuff for the type geeks following along. Briefly, let's touch base on this. From a chemical or neurotransmitter side, this is going to be the subtype that's associated with testosterone the most, and the functions of this personality type. So the driver or dominant cognitive function for ISTPs is introverted thinking or accuracy. That's what we've nicknamed it here at Personality Hacker. And the co-pilot or auxiliary is going to be extroverted sensing, or what we call sensation. How are these attuned? There's a reason why there are dominant ISTPs, because the attunement of these two cognitive functions has a particular, attitude toward it. Not attitude, I guess that's the wrong word I should use.
That's a technical term.
But attunement, I guess attunement's a good way to say it.
Yeah. So each of the cognitive functions has a capacity to be really focused and kind of assertive, assert their energy outward, and almost have blinders on because it has so much purpose to it, or so much assertion. And that's called an analytic way of expressing that function. And then there's a more holistic way, and that is more diffused energy, a broader territory. You take in more peripheral, and it's a little bit more receptive, but it's not, it doesn't get as much done because it's not as assertive, but it sees a bigger picture. And in the dominant ISTP subtype, both the functions that you just mentioned, both the introverted thinking accuracy or an extroverted sensing sensation, they both have an analytic preference. And that's one of the reasons why they're so persistent.
And they're dominant. Okay.